This video is not necessarily right along the lines we're talking, but generally, and it's one that Mark posted on his Facebook, and I thought that's interesting. So we'll play it here.
Statement in verse 49. Jesus says, I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. That might shock you, because most people's idea of Jesus is that he's some kind of a sentimental, loving, peaceful person and nothing more. But here he says, I wish the fire had already started. He wishes it were time to light the final fire of judgment. It's an amazing comment. Jesus longs for the judgment. He wants the judgment to come. If this seems alien to your understanding of God, then you don't understand that God is a God of justice and holiness and righteousness and wrath and vengeance. It might seem strange to unbelievers that this is about as far away from their perception of Jesus as it could be, and yet his holiness longs for judgment. Why? To bring an end to sin and sinners.
So that was an interesting little tidbit of a sermon. What do you think about that?
Asking me?
Both you guys.
I think it's not the most common thing that is known about Jesus. And I think that it should be very sobering to most believers, and for those that are unbelievers, well, they wouldn't even know that. So I think that it's a call to repentance and a call to action, and I'm also grateful that if the Lord feels that way, that I'm grateful for the way that he perceives things. He's our leader, he's our Lord, he's our master, he's our guide, he's our God, he is all in all. So his will, his righteousness, that's what we follow, that's what leads us, should be leading us, and which means he's right in how he thinks and feels. So I would like an end to sin as well.
Wow. I was going to read that reference, but it's not pulling up on my computer. It's weird. There we go. I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled, but I have a baptism to undergo, and what constraint I am under until it is completed. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. And he says, the next verse is, he said to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you will say it's going to rain, and it does. When the south wind blows, you say it's going to be hot, and it is. Hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time? So he's reading that verse and preaching about it as if it's about the end times. And when I hear it, and when I read it in this deal, and especially you get to verse 56, is how is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time? Again, it tells me this is referring to the same as Revelation. It's referring to when God judged the Israelites, and at that time was coming soon. So going through this book gave me a different perspective on when he read this. So what do you guys think about that?
Can you summarize that? What you just said, like summarize that a little bit, reiterate?
Whatever his name is there, that preacher, he's talking about those verses being about the end times.
Yeah.
When I read that section of scripture, even when I heard his video, immediately I knew he was thinking end times, and I'm thinking, no, this was the judgment of the Israelite nation. And so I went and looked up the reference and I read it. And so 49 is the verse that he has started from there and really going off of. It ends at 56. And 56 says, hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it you don't know how to interpret this present time?
You're stating that he is speaking in present tense versus any future.
Correct. That he's talking much like what Godawa is talking about, that the quote-unquote end times is the end of the Old Testament covenant, and judgment is coming on the Israelite nation for rejecting all the prophets and then killing his son. What do you think?
So out of all the studies that we've done so far,
Yeah.
I feel like the whole theme that I want to say is like, okay, I agree with preterist viewpoint, but what does that leave as the remainder with our current present day?
What it means is essentially that the vision of the book of Revelation was largely, at least, given for that church in the early days that was going through some severe persecution and had ended up with a lot of bloodshed. And what we have now is basically the mission that Jesus said he's coming back, and we're supposed to be going out and telling good news
You can come sit here.
and casting out demons and healing the sick and delivering those that are in bondage.
I could, but I'm gonna see.
And so he doesn't tell us a whole lot about what's going on now, which makes sense.
Down. I haven't seen chocolate in such a long
And then
time.
if
Where's
that
Raider?
were the case,
He's
we,
upstairs.
you know, if there's stuff
I'm
we
gonna
need
see
to know now that's special, he would be giving people visions and telling us those things. And it would be all of this feeding frenzy of, oh, look at the news, Jesus is coming soon, would just, isn't even supposed to be there, you know? So that's kind of the idea, but that's what I thought when I seen that video. And when I researched the references, it only reinforced what I already was thinking.
Did we start?
Yeah, we started.
So I want to make sure we had enough time to finish things up. So I did play this video for everybody. Is Caleb coming or?
Yeah, he's in the bathroom. Yeah.
TT, can you grab me a coffee cup or a few? So, if we have time, we'll play the video again at the end. We'll do that. And if they can't be quiet, we'll go back. Okay. So we are in the second part of the coming of the Son of Man, which is chapter 13. I'm gonna back up a little bit just to get us in gear here. Oreo. Yeah, just move on.
Oh.
So we'll start with page 128. A sign in heaven, or the Son of Man in heaven. And so this is from Matthew 24, 30, and 31. Unfortunately, the Greek grammar is not clear. This translation reads that a sign in the sky or heaven will appear, indicating the Son of Man. However, it is just grammatically correct and actually makes more sense from the text to be translated, and then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, as in King James, NIV, RSV, and other translated. There is no sign in heaven or the sky that Jesus is coming. There is a sign that Jesus is in heaven. This makes more sense with the scriptures when Jesus is described as being in heaven at the right hand of God, endowed with his power. And that's one of the reasons why I always tell people, they say, well, which translation should I get? Well, get a translation you understand, but when you're studying the Bible, you need to look at multiple translations. When I was growing up, that was hard because you got to have different Bibles on the table. And if you really want to spend money, you could get something with 3 or 4 translations in it. Or possibly, if you looked real hard and spent a lot of money, possibly 6 translations. But nowadays, you can pull up on your computer or even your phone and have 8 or 12 or 15 translations available to you right there. And if you see something that is critically different in some verses, then if there's only one translation that does it that way, you could look into that Greek or Hebrew and see, but odds are that one might be a little off. But if you're seeing a good chunk that are saying one thing and a good chunk saying another thing, chances are it's just really hard to translate. It's just not real translatable, which there are things like that. And so that, then you dig into the Greek or the Hebrew and see more what it's saying and see what lines up with the rest of the scriptures. So this is a very good case in point for that. Matthew 26:64. From now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Acts 7:55 and 56. At the right hand of God. And Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. So he's got a number of scriptures listed here where it talks about this concept. And that's something that else, as you're studying scriptures, where else does it talk about this? Where else is this phrase, and how did they translate it, and how is it handled in that set of verses? The notion of Christ at the right hand of God in heaven permeates the New Testament. But I want you to notice something else consistently in all these passages. Notice how that right hand represents God's power and authority over all powers and authorities, both earthly and heavenly.
Can I bring Vader downstairs?
No.
That power is ultimately deity, as we will
Aaron, bring Oreo.
see shortly.
He's staying.
Yeah, he needs to stay out there because we can't do the meeting, it's too loud.
Alright. No chocolate. Alright.
Are you going to sit there or sit out there?
Looks like it's a whole Lego set here.
There is.
Here, sit right there. That's the TP spot.
Whoa. It's right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, move this. Right here.
That power is ultimately deity, as we will see shortly. But again, this makes sense with Jesus' judgment on the Jews who rejected his authority as Messiah. He was saying that the destruction of their entire covenantal system would be the final sign of the Mosaic covenant authority of Christ as they rejected. How do I know he was still referencing the Jews in his judgment and not the entire world at the end of time? Because he says so in the very next verse. Matthew 24:30, then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. skip along here a little bit. Wrong. The Greek word translated earth here is gi, which is most often translated as land. It either refers to terra firma, the ground we stand on, the dirt, or the empire, as we saw earlier. But for the Jewish audience, the land had a specific meaning that the word earth does not reveal, and that meaning is the land of Israel. Jesus was saying that the tribes of the land of Israel will mourn when they see the proof of his messiahship in heaven, the destruction of their temple, and this is exactly what was prophesied in the Old Testament and fulfilled in the first century. Zechariah 12:10, so that when they look on me on whom they have pierced, they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child. We already established in chapter 7 that the Jews of the first century were considered guilty by God and the apostles of rejecting Messiah and killing him by crucifixion, whom they have pierced. John 19:36-37, they will look on him who they have pierced. The book of Revelation references gi quite a bit, as in this passage. You can easily see how deeply misunderstood Revelation has become by mistranslating the word earth instead of land, which makes people misread it as globe instead of the land of Israel. Reread Revelation now with this awareness, and you'll see a real change in the meaning. Coming on the clouds in heaven. I had always understood coming on the clouds as being an obvious literal allusion to Jesus floating in on the clouds in the sky in a climatic ending to history. What else could it mean? Then I was shown in the Old Testament the very clear precedent of this metaphor. With a new understanding of the ancient Jewish mindset and how they interpreted these words, I began to see it as the very opposite of the wooden, literalistic event I used to see it as. Let me show you what changed my mind, and I'm sure will begin to change yours. Coming on the clouds is used throughout the Old Testament as a figurative storm reference to God's judging presence upon a city, nation, or people. Clouds and storms are both metaphors for deity and for local judgment. Here is a brief survey of the instances. So he's got a list of references there. Nahum says the clouds are the dust of his feet. Psalms, darkness was under his feet, swiftly on the wings of the wind. The clouds dark with water. Ezekiel, it will be a day of clouds. Isaiah, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and comes to Egypt. Isaiah 30 says with a cloud burst. Joel, a day of clouds and thick darknesses. These are all local and limited judgments upon cities, nations, or peoples. And they all use the imagery of God coming on the clouds with the storm of judgment. This was a common ancient image of God's judgment. So Jesus coming on the clouds of heaven in power and glory was an obvious figurative expression of Jesus' presence in the judgment upon Jerusalem, the sign of his power and the glory of the new covenant. But there's one more thing. In each of these cases, God used a different nation or people as his tool to perform the judgment. In other words, the pagan people carried out God's will. They represented him spiritually. The Roman Empire eventually did fall. A good historical argument has been made that though the barbarians ultimately invaded and overthrew Rome, its power first became crippled within due to the growth of Christianity that subverted pagan devotion to the idolatrous authority of Caesar. Where have I seen this before? There's no coincidence that Jesus quoted Daniel's abomination of desolation and then described himself as the Son of Man coming on the clouds, prophesied by Daniel as well. And if we look at it, we'll see that it reinforces everything I've been writing. In Daniel, he says, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. Got Hebrews listed there. Ephesians 1, 20, 22. He worked in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places, far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in age, but also not only in this age, but also the one to come. He put all things under his feet. It's very interesting. He really chimes in on this stuff about how Jesus has already been given all authority, 100%. And Jesus gave us the authority that he has over demons and principalities. And Godawa, he really doesn't even know what to think about demons. I don't know if he believes in healing or not, really, the way that I do.
Do you know the Noah movie on Netflix, 2014? You know how they were saying, like, the Watchers, they disobeyed God by coming to help out Adam and Eve and
I haven't
whatever.
seen the 2014 one yet.
It sucks, but it, he, you know how yesterday you were saying how, like,
You sure it's 2014?
yeah, Baptists believe in,
They
like,
had one just like 2 or 4 years ago.
no, it's 2014.
That's the last one.
But I think that's the one you're thinking of, where like they had the Watchers as like these stone guys, like they were big rock boulders that were walking around. Anyways, they were like, they were saying that those are Watchers, and they like disobeyed God, like they were fallen, like they were basically fallen angels, but weren't demons.
The stone ones?
Yeah. And that's what you were saying, right? Is that kind of what the Baptists believe?
Well, the Baptists
We should watch it.
The Baptists believe.
I don't really
that's,
think it's
that's
accurate.
2014.
Yeah, it's not really accurate at all. But
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
The Bible doesn't say a whole lot about demons, about where they come, who they are, what they do. It mainly talks about getting rid of them. It gives us, I mean, you could sum it all up in one paragraph. Everything that it says. And it's pretty minimal. But definitely it is a warfare that we are supposed to be warring. And definitely the church lost track of that in the Dark Ages, for sure. And it's taken us a long time as a race to realize what God's teaching there. I think Godawa does pretty good on diving into what our Watchers.
he needs to turn. He's a movie director, isn't he? He needs to turn his books into a movie.
He's not a director, but he's been in a movie
Producer
industry.
or whatever,
He actually has put out the word that he's looking for people that are willing to help him work on movies. So
For
he's
those-
trying to get a movie going.
For like his Netflix
ones,
series.
yeah.
Oh, good,
I don't know which one exactly, but
dude. It's a good series.
you know, he had an idea for doing a Noah movie, and then the other guy came out with the Noah movie,
that one sucks.
and it was, that guy had a lot more money behind him and everything, connections. He's like, there's no way I can compete, so what can I do? So, and he needed to do something to keep his money rolling, so he came out with the Noah book, which was the first of his Nephilim series. So, things are moving, but he does pretty good for trying to nail down how everything relates. It's probably the best I've seen. Plus, he weaves it into a story to help you see some of the details and relationship stuff, and that's helpful. Definitely, Hollywood has never been good on theology. But getting back to being on focus here, he doesn't really believe in healing, I don't think. I don't know that he believes much about casting out demons, but he definitely is of the persuasion that he flat out says, you see all the evil in our society and evil leaders and all the garbage that's going on. This is because of one reason, and that is Christians are not standing up and doing their job. And that's an awfully bold statement, but I like it. I think it's very accurate. And like I say, I don't even know where he stands on this stuff. But that's his take on it. We have to start doing our job, or the world just goes down the tube. This is why the world stinks, is because Christians aren't standing on the authority they've been given. So it's interesting, and so this is one of the verses. That's why I wanted to read that verse. But there's a number of places throughout Scripture, and he talks about it a fair amount in his stuff here. Daniel 7, for this cornerstone cut without hands would break in pieces all the kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it will stand forever. God's kingdom that Jesus brought on this earth, the kingdom of heaven brought here on this earth, still stands to this day. And it has withstood everything that Russia and China and every other country could throw at it. It has even withstood the Muslim nations trying to wipe it out and destroy it entirely. It is a nation that has stood against more than any other nation ever has. But it's a nation that you don't see with your eyes. It's a spiritual nation. It's a spiritual kingdom. And it is standing forever. Those kingdoms that were in fact broken to pieces were Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, ancient Rome, that crucified the Messiah. The fourth world kingdom of Daniel 2:40 would fall and be crushed by the cornerstone of the Messiah. But look closer and you'll see that the Son of Man coming on the clouds was not coming down to earth from the sky, but rather was coming up to the throne of God in heaven to sit at God's right hand. Jesus wasn't coming down to earth, Matthew 24:30. The destruction of the city and temple were a sign that Jesus was the Messianic Son of Man and he had come up to the right hand of God. It was proof to the Jews that the Roman destruction of their city and temple was Jesus, or God's judgment, because they had rejected Messiah. It was the sign that the Son of Man was in heaven at the right hand of God with messianic power and glory. Matthew 26:64. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Angel gathering the elect, he has a number of references about that. Ken Gentry makes a strong biblical argument in this his Revelation commentary, that the angels in the seven churches in Revelation may actually have been the human messengers of the letter to the congregation, lectors who would read the text to the church body since they didn't have their own Bibles. We bring the message of the gospel to the four winds of the earth, just as he commanded. And God used the gospel as the means to gather his elect into his kingdom. The loud trumpet is reminiscent of the shofar trumpet in the temple that would call the Jews to worship, or it would call them to war. Now that the physical temple would be destroyed, this trumpet call is an obvious figurative expression of the call to preach the gospel to the lost. We have, there's always a pull, and it's getting stronger, to go back to the original rules of the Old Covenant. People are getting more into, you gotta be able to read Hebrew to understand the Bible. You gotta have a prayer shawl. You gotta read the scriptures in Hebrew. There's this big push to go back to these physical things we can handle and touch and do, because as humans we like that stuff. And that stuff is symbolic of what was coming. People buy shofars now. pastors that have been pastors for a while, a lot of them tend to end up with a shofar one way or another, which is a ram's horn. And it's cool stuff. It's cool. But some people really take it as, boy, if you blow the shofar, then this gives, special means, special power, special things can happen spiritually because you're blowing the shofar. And it's kind of pseudo-spiritual stuff. It's not real. It's not biblical. But in the same way, boy, if you read Hebrew, then you really get to understand the scriptures. Well, we should always be pushing to understand and learn more. But again, it gets very religious, very pseudo-religious. It's not about reading Hebrew. It's about reading and studying and understanding the Bible with all the tools that you have at hand. The loud trumpet, let's see. Historically speaking, this is exactly what happened after Jesus came in judgment upon Israel, destroyed the temple, and led the Jews into captivity. The Christians escaped and were dispersed to spread the gospel to nations, a gospel that gathered together the children of God from all nations. John 11:51, but also gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. That's gathering the Gentiles, gathering everyone who's not a Jew. As we see in this and other New Testament passages, the growth of the church is the fulfillment of the promise of God's people to be brought out of exile from the nations. Acts 2, Romans 10, quoting Isaiah 52 and 53 about the return from exile. As New Testament scholar N.T. Wright explains, and he's got a little paragraph there of him, but at the end he says, the return from exile began when Jesus, again as a representative Messiah, emerged from the tomb 3 days later. So the gathering of the elect by angels is not a miraculous rapture or a resurrection, but rather the congregational assembly of God's people. It refers to God building his church, or ecclesia, assembly, the new assembly of God's people, by drawing them from every nation into the kingdom through the call of the gospel. Matthew 22:37, Acts 2, John 6:44, 10:16, Romans 10:17. And the thing is, if you really want to wrap your head around this stuff, you really have to read those scriptures. You can't just look at the reference and move on. You have to actually pull up every one of the scriptures and read them and see if what he is saying lines up with what those scriptures are saying. That's where it starts really getting cemented in you. That's studying. And lo and behold, this is exactly what God prophesied in the Old Testament. In conclusion, he's going to quote Kenneth Gentry. Christ's judgment coming affects several dramatic results. It brings God's wrath upon the Jews for rejecting their Messiah, according to these references, and it concludes the anticipatory Old Covenant era, Hebrews 1:11, 12, 18 through 29, which in the first century is becoming obsolete and growing old, and is ready to vanish away. According to Hebrews and Galatians, it finally and forever closes down the typological sacrificial system, reorienting the worship of God. John in Hebrews, it vindicates Christ's followers against their first enemies, Matthew 10, Matthew 23, Matthew 24, 1 Thessalonians, Revelations, and it effectively universalizes the Christian faith by freeing it from all Jewish constraints. And it is clear through a number, he gives some references there, that we don't have to follow these Jewish laws anymore. We can eat pork. It's okay. We can eat these unclean animals, shellfish, and things like this. And he says, is there no return of Christ in our future? Wow, I never thought I would ever get to the point where I would see the coming of Christ in Matthew 24 as a figure of judgment coming in the armies of the pagan Rome. I had biblical documentation. Now the problem was that all my assumptions became unstable and shaky. Did this mean Christ was not returned in my future? I felt insecure as my whole understanding of God and the future was up in the air. It is an uncomfortable place to be, but it isn't. But isn't it better to follow the truth wherever it leads, even if it becomes scary, than to stay safe and comfortable and wrong? Fear not, the truth leads to a physical return of Christ in our future, a general physical resurrection of the dead, a final judgment, and to the next chapter. So the next chapter is about the return of Christ. So, with that, any questions? So we can watch this video again. And so when we watched it earlier, I explained to these guys that this is one that Mark had posted on his Facebook. And as soon as I seen it, first thing that popped in my head is, this is about the end times.
Can you turn me?
And how immediately I recognized this really isn't about the end times. This is about when God judged the Israelite nation. So you can see what he says here.
There's an amazing statement in verse 49. Jesus says, I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. That might shock you, because most people's idea of Jesus is that he's some kind of a sentimental, loving, peaceful person and nothing more. But here he says, I wish the fire had already started. He wishes it were time to light the final fire of judgment. It's an amazing comment. Jesus longs for the judgment. He wants the judgment to come. If this seems alien to your understanding of God, then you don't understand that God is a God of justice and holiness and righteousness and wrath and vengeance. It might seem strange to unbelievers that this is about as far away from their perception of Jesus as it could be, and yet his holiness longs for judgment. Why? To bring an end to sin and sinners.
So he definitely makes it sound like he's talking about the end times, right? Let me read that section of scripture for you. So that was in Luke.
12:49.
There we go. Luke 12:49. I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and what constraint I am under until it is completed. Do you think I came to bring peace on the earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on, there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided. Father against son, and son against mother, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, but this is what they preach about the end times, correct? Right?
Yeah.
They'll read these verses and say, this is about the end times. That would be louder than the
Straight
other.
perspective.
He said to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say it's going to rain, and it does. And when the south wind blows, you say it's going to be hot, and it is. You hypocrites. You know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it you don't know how to interpret this present time? So again, how does this present time become some 2,000-ish years later? There's just nothing that implies that or backs that up in any way through scripture or English or anything else. Nothing. It's very interesting. I do believe there is a lot of misteaching on the end time stuff. And I don't think it's because people mean to. I think it's because they were taught this is the end time stuff. There's basically these three views. This is what I was taught. This is what Kim was taught. This is what most preachers are taught. There's three basic views. There's the preterists. They say everything's happened already, which is baloney because of this. And then there's this, which a few people believe in. That just doesn't make any sense. And it's conglomeration. You kind of make up their own thing. And then there's futurists, which is basically what we are. And that's what everybody believes is some form of futurist view, which he says actually in the original book that talks about this view is called the dispensational view. In the early part of the 1900s, all the way up till about the 80s, dispensationalism was unquestionable. Everyone believed dispensationalism. But when you talk to people that were into believing for God's healings and stuff, some of these guys started saying, hey, dispensationalism is not true. They didn't talk about it much because they got slapped pretty hard for it. But it got talked about enough eventually to where the churches don't really talk about dispensationalism anymore. They stopped talking about it. When I grew up, I heard about dispensationalism through some of the teachings and preachings here and there. Nowadays, nobody ever hears about it. But it's what all of our theology is based on. And if dispensationalism is false, if it's not a true biblical concept, then it will change literally. And this isn't, I'm stealing this from Armstrong. You literally change how you read the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Dispensationalism is what brought about things like there was a whole pre-Adamic world. There was a whole set of humans before us humans existed. This teaching is out there. They're saying Satan was this and that, and then this happened, and he sinned, and then God had to really destroy the whole world and start all over. That's the stuff that's taught. And it can be taught because of dispensationalism. Because dispensationalism says this happened, and then God closed that chapter or that book, and then this happened, and then he closed that chapter, and this happened, and everything is separate and dislocated. What goes along with that is the whole idea that healing ended. The only reason they could even say that is because of dispensationalism. Nobody ever said that until they nailed down dispensationalism. Because then they could say, well, that dispensation ended with the apostles or disciples or whatever you want to call them. The men who were with Jesus. Yes, Paul was a little unique, even though he had the biggest healing ministry. He actually had kind of met Jesus in a vision. So that was a special deal. This is what they tell you when you nail them down on this stuff. We've been lied to. We've been lied to because our teachers have been lied to. Because they weren't willing to question what they were being taught. Even in high schools, you say, hey, that doesn't make sense, teacher. In a math class, more than not, that teacher's going to say, what doesn't make sense? Well, boom, 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 go step by step. Let's see where it doesn't make sense. In English, there's times they just say, yeah, well, you just need to memorize it. That's what it is. In the communist world, it's across the board. Doesn't make sense to you? Who cares? Do you want to go to jail? You want to get re-educated? This is what it is. Whether it makes sense to you or not. If it doesn't make sense to you enough, we can get you to the re-education camp. Because people died there, so. Oh no, I'm good, I got this. When you're not allowed to question, you gotta know inherently something's not right. That was one of the things I really had to wrestle with a little bit as becoming a soldier. As a soldier, you are supposed to follow your orders unquestioningly. And there's a lot of discussion about all that. But it's not truly unquestionably. When it comes right down to it, it's you follow your orders unquestionably within the lines of the soldier handbook. So, and within the lines of the Constitution. So there is a place to be right. But someone that's going to be willing to question those things will never be a SEAL or a Secret Service guy or anything like this. Because those people need to listen without question. As a Christian, before I went into service, we had one of our big meetings that come up every 2 years or 4 years or something, where they talk about, all the pastors would talk about, for a week they'd meet in meetings and talk about if they were going to change their doctrinal book or not. And that happened the year before I went into service. And I went to the meetings for our church as the youth representative. And I sat in the meetings, a couple of them. And then they have special services where the pastor of all the pastors preaches, and everybody's like, oh man, he is so good. He taught most of us, and he preaches perfect sermons. And I mean, dude, you talk about a pedestal. It was crazy. I was like, wow, okay. And he was preaching some stuff, and at the time, that year or the year before, we had a guest speaker come in to our men's retreat for the denomination who preached about healing and casting out demons. Not cool. In that day and age, in an evangelical church, they literally shut down his first meeting early. And people had questions. The pastor were lined up in the back of the room, crossing their arms, talking to me, like, what do we do? We got to do something. And he said, look, we're going to shut it down. It's getting late. We got lunch and all this. So we got this little room back here. There's like a little office. We're in a hotel or something. He says, we're gonna, whoever wants to ask some questions, go ahead and meet with him in this back room, because they wanted this stuff shut up. And you know what happened? Nobody left. He went by the office, and everybody went by the office, because everybody had questions. Everybody wanted to hear what he had to say, and pastors didn't know what to do. And during that special sermons that we had, the special week, he preached on things. He kind of touched along those lines to kind of lay down the law of where they stand. And I remember looking at my mentor behind me like, dude, are you hearing this? He's like, yep. And we were looking at the pastors around the room. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And I went in the back so I could talk to this preacher who was the preacher of preachers. He literally had taught a lot of the preachers at the time in seminary. So he was really on a pedestal. And so I was in the back hall, everybody saying hi, whatever, and he heads to his office. And said, hey, pastor, it's a good sermon. And he had another guy talking with him, and I went with him into their office. And I said, yeah, I was wondering if I could ask you a question or two. And, oh, yeah, go ahead. And so I asked him, and I was trying to be respectful because I knew I'm already ruffling feathers. And as soon as I asked that question, how dare you question my sermon? You don't question my sermon. You just, we're done. Literally told me that. I'm like, something ain't right with this. If you can't back up what you're preaching, something scary about this. You should be glad you got a teenager come and ask you questions. The problem is, you get in seminary, and you start saying, hey, maybe, are you sure about this or that? Right away, it's like, who are you? How dare you question him like this? You don't question your professor. What we have is fact. That's it. It's unquestionable. This is the way it is. Almost across the board, across the country, across the world. Which is why all these pastors preach what they were taught to preach, especially in Revelation. Nobody ever questioned this stuff. There's very few people out there really digging into it. This guy decided eventually, he said, I have to dig into this. I have to. into. Things kept poking him, and he kept okay. Started digging into it. Started digging into people that are into that world. Digging in all his theology professors and double checking what they were saying and finding that wow, that some of those stuff here, it changes how we view the entire scriptures. It changes how you see yourself in Christ. It changes what you understand about God's authority in you. It changes how you view everything from Genesis to Revelation. And I do firmly believe at this point that you cannot get to where God wants you to be as a faith matrix kind of person with believing the other version, the futurist revelation version of Revelation. You can't, because it shortcuts you right off the bat before you even start. And we already have so much against us, like the world, the advertising, other people, our own flesh, all this stuff. Even as I got in and talk about healing and all this stuff, I've had my sister talk to me 3 or 4 times about how dare I talk to TT about healing like this. My wife has told me many times, how can you do this? I mean, what if she doesn't get healed? Why is there a big concern about what if someone doesn't get healed? This is why people don't get healed. Because we're more concerned about what if they don't. Which means what? Our faith is lacking. Either we really believe God's word or we don't. And in order to get to that point, we have to get rid of a lot of junk that we've soaked up for a lot of years. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. But next week we talk about the return of Christ. So, anybody want to lead in prayer?
Jared says she will.
All right, go ahead, Jer.
No, I'm not.
Yours says you would.
Caleb said
Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah,
I didn't say
I
that.
am not confident.
You got it.
You got it.
Eric,
yeah, dang
would you like the
t-shirt.
honors? Mr.
Father
K.
God, in Jesus' name, we just come before you, Lord. Thank you for this time. We thank you, Lord, for Lonnie's consistency, Lord. We thank you, Father, for your Holy Spirit who is teaching us, Lord. And we are trusting you, Lord, that you will guide us through your Holy Spirit. And, Father, that you would help us to yield to your Holy Spirit that you've provided us. Lord, I just thank that you for everybody here, that everybody contributed, Lord, that everybody is protected on the way that they shall go. And everybody says, Amen.
And